Hi, so I want to just give a little assessment of GB News. This is obviously a new, shall we call it, network. I guess it could come under various definitions, but let's say network for now, which was sort of the brainchild of Andrew Neil. Now, it seems like a good time to talk about this because Andrew Neil is now backtracking and suggesting that it's the biggest regret of a 50-year journalistic career. Andrew Neil, I think it's fair to say, is broadly respected. He's been at the BBC for a long time, but he's one of the rare, more conservative voices at the BBC. But I think a lot of people regard Neil as a voice of common sense. I've always held him in high regard. I think he's a very smart man, and so when he set up this concept, I rejected the notion that this was going to be a British Fox News. Um, It's currently not available on terrestrial TV. You need to subscribe to it. And initially, it was set apparently by technical problems, but I started coming across the YouTube clips, and I've watched a lot of them now. Anyway, Neil has now stepped back. He says he made the mistake of putting his name on the tin and then realizing he had little control over what was going into the tin, as he put it. I can't talk about the inner situation between Andrew Neil and other people at GB News and why he's felt disillusioned with the way it's went. Only he knows that. Um, I guess some people will question his decision to go back to the BBC, if indeed he does. Um, they might say it's a bit flippant or I don't know, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to share what I feel about this network so far. I've watched quite a lot of clips, particularly around the Insulate Britain protests. Um, GB News definitely has a certain style that is different from the BBC or even Sky News. Is it the British Fox News? I would say not quite. There is one thing I dislike about it, though. I'll come to what I like about it in a minute, but I'll just get this out of the way because I think it's important. They're acting a little bit like Sky News Australia when it comes to partisanism. What I mean by that is whenever they talk about President Biden, it's negative, it's cynical. And whilst I believe that everyone is subject to critique, I believe every public figure, especially the President of the United States, isn't above critique. You do question it when the way they speak about his predecessor, and I would argue the way they've even promoted his predecessor, um, then any claims to be impartial is just ridiculous. Sky News Australia, likewise, they're always criticizing Biden, yet they're always full of praise for Trump. Now, Trump hasn't been president for almost a year, but his stink, as far as I'm concerned, is very much still around, and he will almost certainly run in 2024. So he's still very much a public figure. He's still very much, unfortunately, in public discourse. It's not like other former presidents who sort of go on and write their memoirs and they set up a presidential library and they're part of history. Trump probably will come back, and I think that's really unfortunate, but that's the reality. So long as that is the situation, unfortunately, he will be, you know, a topic. He will be a significant figure. But GB News has not taken a balanced view on this. They had Nigel Farage, who's long been one of Trump's biggest puppets, as far as I'm concerned, um, basically talking about how confident he was that Trump will come back. And this has been a direction that GB News has taken. They have chosen to make themselves PR people for Trump. Now, yes, they talk about a lot of other issues. They don't just talk about that. But whenever it comes to American politics, the bias is blindingly obvious. They're anti Biden, they're pro Trump. There may be a few people there that are not that keen on Trump, but this is how they're coming across to me, and I don't like it. Um, because I think, if they were taking a balanced approach to Biden, if they were giving him credit where credit's due and criticizing him, the most latest thing is on the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict. Apparently, Biden's criticized that. Well, they've pointed out that it's unprecedented for a president to question the decision of a jury, and this is a controversial case. It's a big subject. But I left a comment. I said, well, it's also, this idea that this is unprecedented. Well, what about a president who pushes baseless conspiracy theories, who promotes domestic insurrection, who cannot accept loss in an election? Are those things normal? Referring, of course, to Trump. And yet, GB News never questions Trump, even though he's still pushing conspiracy theories and he's still, in my view, creating a problem for democracy. Um, so that's a big problem I have with GB News. Now, on a positive side, I do think they talk about things that are important. They talk about issues around cancel culture, free speech, the right to protest, the limits of protest. I like the fact that they have robustly challenge insulate Britain activists. I do wonder though, have they given them too much airtime? And I wonder is it a little bit of clickbait? I mean, you get this with LBC as well. There's clickbait in this industry. So and so is owned, or so and so is outraged. It's a marketing tool that is quite cynical. I don't really like it, but I understand it. I understand why it's used, and it works. I click on those videos. Um, there are people at GB News I respect. One person is Colin Brazier. I think he comes across very well. There's others as well. So I think it's a little bit lazy to say it's just the British Fox News, but I think that they have to be a little bit careful not to come across as just a shouty right-wing defensiveness. I think it's fair to say that most of um, their anchors, their presenters are more to the political right. I think that's just a fact. Some of them might self-describe themselves as centrists or on the left, but I don't think there's any denying that there is a more of a sway to the right with GB News. I have no problem with them confronting wokeism. In fact, I'm happy that those issues are being challenged. It's very important because the BBC sure doesn't do it. And, the BBC definitely deserves a lot of the criticism it gets. I think it is an arrogant and elitist organisation. Um, but I think if GB News is to survive, at the moment it's still relatively small in the sense that, it's not on terrestrial TV. You have to subscribe to it. I think, though, it's a disgrace that Russia Today still is broadcast in this country. I would take away RT's license and replace it with GB News. Not because I particularly like GB News, but at least it's domestic. Um, and see how it goes, see what its ratings are like, and judge it from there. But I think it's an absolute disgrace that Ofcom failed to act against RT. Yet that slot that RT is currently in, they could put GB News in that slot. When I look at my channel, I can still see RT, but I have to subscribe to GB News. That's ridiculous. I could see GB News from YouTube clips, but I do think they run a risk of getting a little bit of an echo chamber. They will invite on people they disagree with. They've had very mouthy Insulate Britain protesters, but to be honest, they're fringe figures. Um, they're not really inviting on any kind of centre left people who are quite reasonable. The people they invite on tend to be loose cannons. They tend to be people that are easy to dismantle as zealots. Um, I mean, when you have an Insulate Britain activist saying they don't care about the harm they're causing to the public, it's extremely easy to confront that. Because they're their own worst enemy. They are zealots. They're criminals in my view, and it's easy to show them what they are. I think GB News would benefit from someone who's maybe more on the political left, who doesn't quite take that approach that the others take, who maybe offers another point of view. I mean, yes, they will have guests who do that, but I would say all the presenters are at least on the centre right, and that's okay. But they cannot say that they're completely neutral because they're not. And to me, that's a litmus test. The way they approach American politics, the way they talk about Biden so negatively all the time, versus how they periodically, I'm not saying they do it all the time, but the fact is Nigel Farage was, cheerleading for Trump. It's something about Nigel Farage I dislike. This is a man who has made his name fighting for years for a cause he believes in. One of the most significant political figures in this country. He was speaking in Sunderland recently. And Farage is seen by many as a great figurehead for the democratic will of the people. Yet he has no problem being a cheerleader for a man who won't accept democracy. I mean, I do think Farage comes across a bit as Trump's puppet in the UK. I'm not saying that he hasn't made his name by representing British interests, but I have a problem with anyone who's blindly supportive of Trump. And Farage, it's one area where he's not a critical thinker. He's blinded by his friendship with Trump and the fact he just goes out of his way to defend the man. It's it's cringy actually. Um, Farage, I think, is capable of more than that. I think he's capable of actually saying, look, I don't agree with everything he says, but no, he chooses to be a yes man for Trump. I have a problem with that. So anyway, it's probably early days still. I just hope GB News, I don't want to say moderate because I think the subjects to cover are important, but I do think they would benefit from maybe having a slightly more left wing presenter. Otherwise, they run the risk of being seen as an echo chamber and just kind of coming across as this right wing defensive platform that's just exists to counter the woke. I mean, it has to be more than that. It has to be about news. It has to be about a lot more than just countering woke ideology, which I think is good. I think woke ideology should be countered, but it has to be more than that. And right now, I struggle to see what GB News, other than a sort of like response to wokeism, it has to define itself a bit more than that. So that's my take. But I think it has some good presenters, and I think it's got potential. Um, but definitely there's areas I'm not too happy about. I don't like the way they I don't like their position on Donald Trump. The fact that I mean, I guess the test will be when it comes up to the next election and they go out of their way to promote Trump. If they don't do that, then I hope I will be wrong and I hope I will be corrected. Who knows? If my journalism career goes in a certain direction, I might be invited on one day, and then I might eat my words and I might say I was completely wrong about this. Um, but it's early days, and I think it's good to have more voices. I think it's good to have another network rather than, you know, people having more choices in what they watch is a good thing. But that's my concerns about GP News. I think the subjects they cover are valid, but I do think they run the risk of being a little bit of a defensive right wing platform. And that's just boring because, it's not offering something fresh in that sense. Then it will just become the British Fox News.